Linda is 70 years old. She retired 5 years ago after spending nearly 4 decades working as a medical receptionist in Tampa, Florida. Every month, she receives a Social Security retirement benefit of just over $2,000. It's the foundation of her retirement income. She also has a modest IRA, but she tries not to withdraw more than she absolutely needs. Like millions of retirees, Linda plans her budget months in advance. She knows when her Medicare premium comes out. She knows roughly how much she'll spend on groceries. She keeps a close eye on utility bills, prescription costs, and homeowners insurance. But one question keeps coming back every summer. How much will my Social Security check increase next year? A few days ago, she opened her laptop and saw several headlines. 2027 COLA could reach 4.7%. Another article suggested a 3.8% increase. Another said retirees could receive nearly $80 more every month. Linda smiled. Then she paused. Were those numbers official? Should she start planning her 2027 budget around them, or were they simply educated guesses? If you've asked yourself the same questions, you're not alone. Every year, millions of retirees eagerly wait for the cost of living adjustment, better known as the COLA. It's one of the most anticipated Social Security announcements of the year because it directly affects the monthly income of more than 75 million Americans receiving Social Security and supplemental security income. This year, something unusual happened. The estimates moved sharply higher after a stronger than expected inflation report. Suddenly, analysts who only weeks earlier expected a moderate increase began talking about a much larger adjustment. Some estimates now suggest a COLA of around 3.8%. Others believe it could approach 4.7% if inflation remains elevated through the rest of the calculation period. Those numbers immediately generated excitement, but they also created confusion. What do they actually mean? Who produces these estimates? How is the COLA really calculated? And perhaps most importantly, how much more money could actually appear in your monthly Social Security check if those estimates become reality? Today, we're going to answer all of those questions. We'll explain how the COLA is determined. We'll separate official facts from unofficial estimates. We'll show you what different COLA percentages could mean for real retirees. And we'll explain why the official number won't be known until later this year. I'm Michael Bennett. Welcome to Retirement Watch. Our mission is simple. We help seniors understand Social Security, Medicare, retirement income, and the federal decisions that affect financial security in retirement. Before we begin, if you want clear, fact-based explanations about Social Security, Medicare, retirement taxes, and government policies that could affect your retirement income, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss an important update that could help you make better financial decisions. Everything you'll hear today is based on publicly available information from the Social Security Administration, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and other reputable sources. Whenever we discuss projections or estimates, we'll clearly distinguish them from official government announcements. Let's begin with the biggest misunderstanding. Many people believe Congress decides the annual Social Security increase. That's actually not how the system works. The annual cost of living adjustment follows a formula established under federal law. Its purpose is straightforward: help Social Security benefits keep pace with inflation. When prices rise, retirees need more income simply to maintain the same purchasing power. Without periodic adjustments, every year of inflation would gradually reduce the real value of retirement benefits. That's exactly why the COLA exists. But here's something many people don't know. The Social Security Administration doesn't calculate inflation itself. Instead, it relies on data produced by another federal agency, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS. Each month, the BLS publishes several measures of inflation. For Social Security, one specific index matters more than any other: the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, better known as the CPI-W. That index tracks changes in the prices paid by households for a wide range of goods and services, including food, housing, transportation, medical care, and energy. Every autumn, the Social Security Administration compares the average CPI-W during the third quarter of the current year with the average from the same quarter 1 year earlier. If prices increased, beneficiaries receive a COLA. If prices remained flat or declined, there may be little or no increase. The formula itself is automatic. Neither Congress nor the President decides the annual percentage. Now, here's where things become interesting, because the official calculation depends on inflation data that hasn't been fully published yet. Economists and retirement organizations spend months estimating what the final number might be. They're not guessing randomly. They're analyzing inflation trends as new data becomes available every month. As each inflation report is released, those estimates become more accurate. But they remain estimates until all required data has been published. That's exactly what's happening now. Following the latest inflation report, several respected analysts revised their projections upward. The Senior Citizens League now estimates a 2027 COLA of approximately 3.8%. Independent Social Security analyst Mary Johnson believes the adjustment could climb even higher, potentially approaching 4.7% if inflation continues running hotter than expected. Notice the wording carefully. Could, not will. That's an important distinction. Neither estimate is official. Both are informed projections based on the latest inflation data available today. The official announcement will come only after the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes all of the third quarter CPI-W data needed to complete the statutory calculation. Only then will the Social Security Administration announce the official COLA that takes effect in January of 2027. So why did the estimates increase so much? The answer begins with inflation. Earlier this year, many analysts expected inflation to continue cooling. That would have produced another relatively modest COLA, perhaps not much larger than the previous year's adjustment. Then came the latest inflation report. Several categories, including housing and other major consumer expenses, remained stronger than economists expected. That higher inflation immediately affected COLA projections because every new CPI-W report feeds into the calculation. Imagine filling a bucket with water 1 cup at a time. After each cup, you can estimate how full the bucket will eventually become, but you won't know the exact level until the final cup has been poured. That's how COLA forecasting works. Each monthly inflation report adds another piece of information. By late summer, estimates become increasingly reliable, but they're still not final. Now let's make this practical. Suppose the 3.8% estimate becomes the official COLA. A retiree receiving approximately $2,026 per month today would see that benefit increase to roughly $2,103 per month next year. That's an increase of about $77 each month. Over an entire year, that's more than $900 in additional benefits. Now imagine the higher estimate. If the final adjustment reached approximately 4.7%, that same retiree would receive an even larger monthly increase. For households living primarily on Social Security, the difference between a 3% adjustment and one approaching 5% can meaningfully affect the annual household budget. But before anyone begins planning vacations or major purchases, there's something important to remember. A larger COLA is generally good news only because prices have increased. In other words, the extra money isn't a bonus. It's intended to help retirees keep up with higher living costs. If groceries, utilities, insurance, and healthcare become more expensive, retirees need larger monthly checks simply to maintain the same standard of living. That's one reason economists often describe the COLA as preserving purchasing power rather than increasing wealth. Understanding that difference changes the way we interpret these projections. The bigger headline isn't simply that the estimated COLA has increased, it's why. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. In the next part, we'll examine how different inflation scenarios could affect the final COLA, why some retirees feel the adjustment never fully matches their actual expenses, and what a 3.8 or even 4.7% increase could really mean for households across America. Now let's answer the question every retiree is asking. If the final COLA ends up around 3.8% or even 4.7%, what would that actually mean for your monthly Social Security check? The answer depends entirely on the benefit you're already receiving. Let's start with a simple example. Imagine Robert. He's 73 years old and receives about $1,500 a month in retirement benefits. If the final COLA were approximately 3.8%, his monthly payment would increase by about $57. Over a full year, that adds nearly $700 to his total benefits. Now consider Linda, whose monthly benefit is about $2,026. Using the same 3.8% estimate, her payment would increase to roughly $2,103 per month. That's an increase of about $77 every month. Over 12 months, that's more than $900 additional dollars. Now imagine someone receiving $3,000 each month. A 3.8% adjustment would add roughly $114 every month. Over the course of a year, that's nearly $1,400. If the higher estimate of 4.7% became reality, every one of those increases would be even larger. At first glance, those numbers sound encouraging. But here's the important question. Does a larger COLA actually leave retirees better off? Not necessarily. Remember why the adjustment exists in the first place. A larger COLA usually reflects higher inflation, and inflation affects almost every part of a retiree's budget. Think about Linda again. Suppose her Social Security benefit increases by roughly $77 each month. Now suppose her grocery bill rises by $30. Her homeowner's insurance increases by $20. Prescription costs climb another $15, and her utility bills increase by $20. Suddenly, much of that COLA has already been absorbed by higher living costs. The adjustment helped preserve her purchasing power. It didn't necessarily improve it. That's one reason many retirees say they still feel financially squeezed even after receiving a COLA increase. The adjustment follows a national inflation formula. Individual household expenses often rise at different rates. Now let's slow down for a moment. This is one of the most common misconceptions about the cost of living adjustment. Many people view it as a raise. Technically, it isn't. It's an inflation adjustment. Its purpose is to help maintain the buying power of your benefit, not to increase your standard of living. Now here's another question. Why do some retirees believe the COLA doesn't accurately reflect the inflation they experience? The answer begins with the inflation index used to calculate it. As we discussed earlier, the Social Security Administration relies on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, the CPI-W. That index reflects spending patterns patterns for working households. But many retirees spend their money differently. Older Americans often devote a larger share of their budgets to healthcare, prescription medications, housing, and long-term care. If those costs rise faster than the overall CPI-W, some retirees may feel their personal inflation rate is higher than the official measure used for the COLA. That's why organizations representing older Americans have occasionally argued that Congress should consider using a different inflation index, one that more closely reflects retiree spending patterns. Others argue that maintaining a single nationwide formula provides consistency and predictability. It's an ongoing policy discussion, but under current law, the CPI-W remains the official measure used to calculate Social Security COLAs. Now let's return to the current estimates. Why are analysts talking about 3.8% in one report and 4.7% in another? The difference comes down to assumptions. The Senior Citizens League projects approximately 3.8% based on the inflation data available today and expectations for the remaining months of the calculation period. Independent analyst Mary Johnson has suggested that if inflation remains stronger than expected throughout the rest of the summer, the final adjustment could approach 4.7%. Neither estimate is guaranteed. Both depend on inflation reports that have not yet been released. Imagine forecasting the final score of a football game at halftime. You already have meaningful information. You know how both teams are playing. You can make an educated prediction. But the second half hasn't been played yet. Unexpected events can still change the outcome. That's essentially where we are with the 2027 COLA. Several important inflation reports remain ahead. Each one has the potential to move the estimate higher or lower. Now here's something else that's worth remembering. The official COLA calculation focuses only on inflation. It doesn't consider the financial condition of the Social Security Trust funds. It doesn't depend on congressional negotiations. It isn't adjusted because of elections. And it isn't influenced by public opinion. If inflation meets the legal formula, beneficiaries receive the adjustment required under law. If inflation turns out lower than current estimates, the COLA will also be lower. The process is automatic. Now let's consider another practical question. Could a larger COLA increase your Medicare costs? The answer is yes, in some situations. Many retirees have their Medicare Part B premiums deducted directly from their Social Security benefits. If Medicare premiums rise in the same year as the COLA, part of your larger Social Security payment may be offset by those higher health care costs. The exact impact depends on future Medicare premium announcements, which are calculated separately. That's another reason it's important not to focus only on the COLA percentage. Your actual increase in spendable income depends on several moving parts. Let's summarize what we know so far. Inflation came in stronger than many analysts expected. As a result, 2027 COLA projections have increased. Current estimates range from roughly 3.8% to as high as 4.7%. Those estimates are based on available inflation data. They are not official. The Social Security Administration cannot announce the final COLA until all required third quarter CPI-W data has been published. Until then, every estimate remains exactly what it is, an estimate. So where does that leave retirees today? Should you begin planning next year's budget around a 4.7% increase, or should you wait for the official announcement before making financial decisions? That's exactly what we'll answer next. In the final part of this discussion, we'll examine the three most likely COLA scenarios, explain what retirees should actually do while waiting for the official announcement, and discuss the key dates every Social Security beneficiary should have on their calendar before the 2027 increase becomes official. Now let's answer the question that matters most. What should you actually expect over the next few months? The truth is that no one, not the Social Security Administration, not the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and not any private forecasting organization, knows the final COLA today. They can't, because the calculation isn't complete yet. Several inflation reports are still ahead, and each one has the potential to move the final number. That leaves us with three realistic scenarios. Let's begin with the one many analysts currently consider the most likely. The final COLA comes in close to 3.8%. This is the current estimate from the Senior Citizens League. If inflation continues following its recent trend without any major surprises, the final adjustment could land somewhere near that level. For the average retired worker receiving roughly $2,026 per month, that would increase the monthly benefit to about $2,103. Over an entire year, that's more than $900 in additional benefits. For many retirees, that extra income would help offset rising grocery prices, insurance premiums, utility bills, and other essential expenses. Now consider the second scenario. Inflation remains stronger than economists currently expect. Housing costs continue climbing. Energy prices increase again. Healthcare inflation remains elevated. If those conditions persist through the remaining months included in the COLA calculation, independent analyst Mary Johnson believes the adjustment could approach 4.7%. That would represent one of the largest cost of living adjustments in recent years. Naturally, many retirees would welcome a larger monthly Social Security check. But remember what we've discussed throughout this video. A larger COLA usually reflects higher inflation. In other words, retirees receive more money because they're also paying more for everyday necessities. The adjustment helps protect purchasing power. It doesn't necessarily improve it. Now let's look at the third scenario. Inflation cools more quickly than expected during the remaining calculation period. If that happens, today's estimates could gradually move lower before the official announcement. That's entirely possible. Forecasts change because the underlying data changes. We've seen that happen before. Early COLA estimates often move several times before the final number becomes official. That's why experienced analysts always emphasize the same point. Treat estimates as estimates, not guarantees. Now here's an important date every Social Security beneficiary should know. The official 2027 cost of living adjustment won't be announced until the Social Security Administration has received all of the required third quarter consumer price index data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Traditionally, that announcement is made in mid-October. Until then, every projection you see, whether it's 3.8%, 4.7%, or something else, remains unofficial. Let's pause for a moment. Think back to Linda. When she first saw headlines promising a possible 4.7% increase, she immediately wondered whether she should begin planning next year's budget. Now, she understands something much more important. The estimate isn't a promise. It's a projection based on incomplete data. She also understands that even if the larger adjustment becomes reality, much of it may simply offset higher living costs rather than creating additional spending money. That perspective allows her to plan more carefully. Instead of assuming the largest estimate will happen, she can prepare for several possibilities. That's exactly what financial planners recommend. Now let's talk about what you can do while waiting for the official announcement. First, avoid making major financial decisions based on preliminary COLA estimates. If you're considering a large purchase, changing your withdrawal strategy, or adjusting your monthly budget, remember that the official percentage hasn't been determined yet. Waiting for confirmed information usually leads to better decisions. Second, continue monitoring official updates from the Social Security Administration. The SSA publishes the official COLA announcement every year, as soon as the legal calculation is complete. That announcement, not news headlines or social media posts, is the number that matters. Third, review your retirement budget. Even before the final COLA is announced, this is an excellent opportunity to evaluate how inflation has affected your own expenses. Ask yourself a few simple questions. Have grocery costs increased? Are insurance premiums higher than last year? Have prescription drug expenses changed? Has your property tax bill gone up? Understanding where your money is going is often just as important as knowing how much your Social Security benefit may increase. Fourth, remember that Social Security is only one part of your retirement income. If you have an IRA, a 401k, a pension, or other investments, consider how inflation may affect those resources as well. A well-balanced retirement plan doesn't rely on a single income source. Now, here's another point worth remembering. Every year, headlines focus heavily on the COLA percentage, but the percentage itself tells only part of the story. What's equally important is what happens to your actual purchasing power. Suppose inflation slows significantly after the COLA takes effect. Your larger monthly benefit could gradually stretch further because prices become more stable. On the other hand, if inflation remains stubbornly high, even a generous COLA may feel smaller than expected. That's why economists often focus on real purchasing power rather than simply the size of the adjustment. The goal isn't receiving the biggest possible COLA. The goal is preserving your ability to pay for the goods and services you need throughout retirement. Before we finish, let's summarize what we've learned today. Current estimates suggest the 2027 Social Security cost of living adjustment could be significantly larger than this year's increase. The Senior Citizens League currently projects approximately 3.8%. Independent analyst Mary Johnson believes the adjustment could reach as high as 4.7% if inflation remains elevated. Those estimates are based on the latest inflation data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They are credible, but they are not official. The Social Security Administration will announce the final COLA only after all required third quarter inflation data has been published. Until then, every projection should be viewed as an informed estimate, not a guaranteed outcome. If the larger estimates become reality, millions of retirees will receive higher monthly benefits beginning in January of 2027. But those larger checks will also reflect the reality that prices have risen across much of the economy. Understanding that relationship is one of the most important parts of retirement planning. Here at Retirement Watch, we'll continue tracking every monthly inflation report, every major Social Security announcement, and every federal policy that could affect your retirement income. As new information becomes available, we'll explain what changed, why it changed, and what it means for you. Always using official sources and straightforward language. If you found today's discussion helpful, consider sharing it with a friend or family member who's wondering how much their Social Security check could increase next year. There's a good chance they've seen the same headlines. Now they'll understand what's behind them. I'm Michael Bennett. Thank you for watching Retirement Watch, helping seniors understand their benefits. And remember this, the estimate may change. The headlines may change, but the official COLA will always be determined by one thing: the inflation data written into federal law.